episode of the In the House podcast. I got a couple of heavy hitters on today, especially in the Austin,
Heavy
Texas region.
No body shaming here.
Yeah. But I got Tim Hill and Daniel Glauser from Rising or Build today. You're not going to want to miss what they have to say, so we're going to talk about the different roles of the construction field team and what that should look like. And I'm also going to get their opinion on what are some good habits that a project manager or superintendent should do every day. And then how do you keep a team on track with the goals, especially as things change? You know, it's very fluid. How do you keep everybody on track? And then I also want to get y'all's opinion on who's responsible for driving quality overall. So, but let's get into it. Michael, you got a headline or something?
I do.
What is it? I'm interested in it.
This one's specific to our Central Texas listeners, which is turns out is most of y'all. But a couple weeks ago, a city of Austin just released a link on their website that we'll put on ours. But they're looking for feedback on their housing criteria manual, and it can be as general as, you know, they're just open to the public, but it's kind of a unique time where the city of Austin is actually asking for public input on housing criteria manual.
No way.
I know,
cool.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah, it's
See what they do with the
but yeah, right. That's part of a huge process. Specifically, some of the issues that have come up are there are certain lots in Austin that in the zoning are kind of problematic, and which means an example of that could be that they are too small to be economically viable for commercial property, for example, but the location-wise is undesirable for single family.
Interesting.
And so the city of Austin, as the city gets larger, more complex, there's a need for their housing criteria manual to expand, and that's kind of part of the genesis of the acronym they're using is TARP, which I can't remember what that stands for off the top of my head. But anyways, yeah, we'll send the link out, and you guys take a look.
Yeah, so you sent me that link, and I clicked on it, and, you know, typical City of Austin fashion, it makes no sense to me.
So good.
My eyes immediately glazed over. Like, what the heck am I looking at?
Do not use the back button.
Yeah,
Don't hit the back button.
I love that
gosh,
feature.
Everybody knows that. But
good.
yeah, so I guess it's a link you follow. You go online and you can comment about frustrations or.
Yeah.
It's not a venting platform. Don't go on there and just vent about anything.
This is not a
mean, you can
Facebook
if you
group.
want,
It
but-
This
sounds
is
like
not a
it's-
Facebook
They're
support
looking
group.
for
Yeah.
specific feedback.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I would. If you're going to go on, I would look at the manual and try to. And I think there's also a proposal out there of some of the things that they've proposed. But basically, I would go in the manual if there's any things that you are guys looking at, whether it's WUI related, whether it's specific zoning related. That I think that could be effective, usable feedback.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's great
Not, I
that
hate
they're putting that
parking
out there
tickets.
and actually, you know, requesting feedback
Yeah.
on how to improve. Hopefully they can take that to heart and make some improvements. But
I think the city, our city specifically, has struggled for decades balancing, the housing need, making sure that we have affordable housing. That's always been an initiative for a long time.
right.
While at the same time struggling with the environmental concerns of growth and
Yeah.
managing lot size and all the things that come with impervious cover. Those often are counterintuitive to each other, right?
Right.
Some of the things I've done recently make a lot of sense, but they're going to continue to struggle through that. And whether it's utility infrastructure, tree preservation, housing and mixed use and all those things, I think they're just looking for general consensus among the public. What are you willing to tolerate? What's your tolerance for, stretching the boundaries of tree preservation or stretching the boundaries of height restrictions or lot size. And
Right.
so they'll figure it out with or without us.
Yeah, maybe. Well, guys, I just want to dive right in. If you could kind of state what it is exactly you do at Reisinger, your position, how long you've been there, and let's get a brief background for those who don't know who you are.
For sure. Okay, so Daniel Glauser, I'm director of construction. So I basically oversee all of our project managers. We've got 6 or 7 projects at the moment. I also manage the pre-construction process and the discovery process, and then post-construction. So I kind of have my hands in all of the things.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Wear many different hats.
Yeah, exactly. And so that can be anything from, running client meetings to, managing different technical issues that we have during construction.
Yeah.
And then also just keeping projects on track, both budget and schedule wise, and just having that general oversight.
Right.
I'm Tim Hill, and I'm the managing partner at Reisinger Build. My partner, Matt Reisinger, moved to Austin 20 years ago. He and I became fast friends, sort of combined forces about 15 years ago. And, it just evolved to the situation it is now because Matt, as many people know, really focuses on builder education and promoting the home building industry and remodeling industry across the country.
Right.
And I think all your listeners will be familiar with his content. Meanwhile, he sometimes participates with Daniel and I in making directional decisions or thought leadership. Very helpful. But the day-to-day workings of the company and helping Daniel monitor our incoming workflow and the projects that we have on the ground and the projects that we have that we're finished with, we're still providing customer service for, as well as all of the long-term financial planning and analysis, and all the risk management, contract development, those things I try to manage myself.
Wow.
Those are all important.
Yeah. Very, very important things.
Got to keep the ship going.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into the first topic, and we've kind of talked about it a little bit beforehand, but sometimes I even struggle explaining to people the differences between some of the roles that you might find on a construction project, right? You might hear the word project manager or superintendent or project engineer or accountant or administrator. There can be a lot of different people involved in the field team on just one project. So I kind of want to break that down and get an understanding and maybe hopefully help some listeners understand, what does a typical construction field team look like and what are their roles?
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. It's hard for people to understand, mostly because there are lots of different roles.
Yeah.
But also, I think every company does it differently, and
That's true.
and
there's a lot of overlap.
A lot of overlap,
Yeah.
and a project manager at one company might be completely different than a project manager at a different company.
Right.
And so, yeah, it can be confusing. Even in the 5 years that I've been at Reisinger, we've kind of switched and changed roles and added people.
Right.
And but so currently the sort of hierarchy that there is now is we have the assistant construction site manager. And so this is someone who could be assigned to one project or multiple projects. And they are there to do material runs, to keep the job site clean, basic, simple sort of labor type tasks, just to keep the project moving and take some of those tasks off of other people's
That's
plate.
huge.
Yeah.
That seems like such a small, insignificant role, but that in itself is
It is so
gigantic.
big, yeah.
That
Yeah.
is such a huge.
Especially for
it-
the subs on site.
Oh,
It
yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And so then the next level up is construction site manager.
Right.
So that's someone who has a little bit more, maybe some basic carpentry skills, or welding or something like that, where they're still doing a lot of the cleanup and remedial tasks, but have a bit more experience and can do a bit more, maybe some scope gap items. So that's really important, because I know there's always those things that's not his job, not his job. Who's going to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so then after that, we kind of go into the management side. So then we have an assistant project manager. And I should mention it, depending on the size of project, we'll either have one or all of these people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it could be just a project manager that has an assistant construction site manager that shows up a couple times a week or something,
Yeah.
But so the assistant project manager, like I said, steps more into that management role where they're not necessarily managing the schedule and budget of the project, but they are sort of maintaining that schedule by keeping the subcontractors on task, answering questions that they may have, or at least being a line of communication to the project manager who is maybe not on site all the time.
That's great. Yeah.
And then, we've got a project now that has an extensive RFI process. And so they sort of do the initial RFIs, then the project manager reviews them and submits them. So take some of that administrative tasks off of their plate. But they're usually on site all the time and, sort of maintain the project. And then you've got the project manager, and that one can vary. So we have project manager and then senior project manager. And the main difference there, at least in our company, is experience level.
Yeah.
And so the project manager, they get brought on towards the end of pre-construction. So they have some input into what the initial budget is going to be, and get familiarized with the client and the budget and the project before it actually starts.
Right.
And then they see that project all the way through to the end. And they are the client liaison. They work with the architect. They determine what the schedule is and manage the schedule, as well as the budget. They do weekly weekly schedule meetings and budget meetings regularly with the clients and the architects. So it's really like they are the builder.
Yeah.
And they can manage typically one or two projects at our company. And then the senior project managers, like I said, they basically take on the more complex projects that are more involved. And then also they mentor the sort of lower levels.
That's a good point. I mean, that's kind of you hit it on the head. I mean, really the differentiating factor between like a project manager and a senior project manager is experience. And then you also gain that role of mentor, right? Like when you become a senior, it's kind of an expectation of you to be able to, bring up and train some of the new hires and, the next generation of builders coming through the company. So that's a good point.
And, one of the things is, we would rather promote people than hire people in.
Absolutely.
Right? And, whether it's the assistant construction site manager or it's the project manager, they are getting experience on site. But if they don't have a mentor or somebody above them that's helping them or teaching them and showing them what's to do, then they may develop bad habits.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's important, and it's something that I think we value a lot.
I'm curious, Tim, to get your thoughts on like how you've seen field teams change over the years. I mean, even from when you first started. I think back even not too long ago when I started, it was one guy and you ran multiple projects, right? And so you had or at least I had the title of superintendent, right?
You're right.
But you were the superintendent, the project manager,
material runner.
You were everything sort of baked into one, which is a great way to learn. It's a great way to get experience, but it's also a poor way in my mind to manage quality on the job and what's being delivered. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Well, I mean, people can't tell that are not watching visually. I'm 70 years old, and I've been doing this since 1980. And you're right. When I first started, I worked for an architect in town who thought he wanted to be a builder for a little while. And he had a superintendent who was a guy who's 60 years old at the time, 65 or something. Very experienced, old guy, been around for a long time. Taught me a lot as an assistant superintendent. And back then, superintendents did some of the manual labor themselves. They did some of the trim carpentry, certainly did a lot of the punch out. We call it commissioning now. And so it's evolved over the years from that model to more a project manager, more sophisticated, sometimes better educated, more experienced individual who doesn't necessarily do very much or any of the manual labor or punch out work.
Right.
But they certainly have the resources and the knowledge and the experience to find those people and procure the materials to get all that done. It works better. Daniel and I have had this conversation several times. I don't really believe that you can be a very good manager and a worker at the same time. It takes two different parts of your brain. And for you to switch during the day or during the hour from trying to be an administrator to somebody who's a craftsman on a dime, I have never yet met that person who can effectively do that. So extracting the two, letting craftsmen be craftsmen and managers be managers seems to work better.
That's a fantastic point. And yeah, you're right. It is hard to switch mentally between those two roles. And also, I mean, you guys are cost plus, right? All your projects. If you think about it, monetarily, your project manager generally is billing more per hour than your lower level, your administrator or somebody. So do you really want somebody who's billing at a higher rate doing the job of somebody, that's handled at a lower rate? Right. I mean, it's kind of a efficiency. When you look at it that way, it's inefficient dollar wise.
Absolutely.
So there's multiple ways of kind of going about that, but I think that was great.
That's a great point, because it is, as a cost plus company, it's our duty to spend the client's money efficiently. And so, having these different tiers of employees, you can then match that sort of hourly rate to the work that needs to be done and have the project manager or whoever focus on those high level things that are more important.
Absolutely.
And it really is the best way, I think, to serve the client.
And I think that's where a long-term company or a team can really win or lose, is because that's where the art comes in of, okay, are putting the right people in the right places.
Yeah.
And whenever you stop doing that, you're losing that efficiency. You're losing the lessons learned, transferring throughout the team. Yeah.
I wanted to jump into the next topic, which was, I want y'all's thoughts on, given y'all's experience, what are some good habits that, field teams should get in the practice of doing every single day?
Well,
ooh, that's a good one.
One thing
It's
I
dicey.
think is,
to go work on some projects.
checklists should be your friend.
Oh, 100%. Preach.
Right? Develop a really good checklist and instill that in your field folks to every day. These are the things. Obviously, you got lots of other things to do, but these 10 core things should be done on site. And for me, Tim and I are both, I'm not quite as old school, but old school. I do a lot of management on the computer, but I do also have a notebook. And I find that carrying that notebook and writing notes in it as I go is a really great way to stay organized. But it's also a really good way for me to manage my time. I start my day every day. I open my notebook and I write out a task list, a checklist. I make my to-dos into a checklist and I color code it with priorities. And then as the day develops, I add to that list, because you don't always know what's going to happen on a daily basis.
Right.
But that just sitting down at my desk, those first 10 minutes, I can just get my head straight and get focused on the things that I knew today. Because, we're inundated with a million things. You think about every decision it takes to go into building a house. You can't have all those in your head at once, right?
Right.
You have to really segment it and decide, okay, what are the priorities for today that I need to work on? And then just push all that other stuff out of your head.
Absolutely.
So that for me, that's one of the main things that I do to keep organized.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's exactly right. Our business is a list-driven business. We just thrive with different types of lists and managing those lists throughout completion.
true, yeah.
Right? And I think that for me personally, and Daniel used the term old school, I'm probably more action-driven than I am thought-driven. And so when I create a list, as Daniel says, I add to it as things come to me, but I'm often tempted to kind of attack them as they come to me, which distracts me from my core list sometimes. And I have to remind myself, wait a minute, there are things more important than this email that just came in.
Right.
I've got to get back to the list. Look at the list. Let the list be the driver. And that generally doesn't fail you. Although these other things are still in the back of my head worrying, like, should I get to that? I'll forget about it if I don't deal with it now. But it works out. Yeah.
That's great. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something I'm working on, and I'm trying to improve, is my ability to make checklists. And I don't necessarily do the day-to-day checklists. I kind of have a mental one. But yeah, I need to be more religious about, I do finally carry notebooks with me. I have multiple ones because I always seem to forget it. So I got one in my truck, one in my bag, one in my house, one in my nightstand. I use my phone. I mean, anything just to jot something down. Because you're right. You said it earlier. There's no way you can keep all this information in your head, and it just gets lost. And those are the details that you need to focus on. And you got to get it out of your head and into something, that you can look at every single day. So whatever that is, whether it's an app or a notebook or a computer program, whatever. But that's great.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes, this is by someone in the advertising industry, but they said, I keep a notebook to write things down, not so I can remember it later, but so I can remember it now.
Yeah.
I always love that. I was like,
Yeah.
because I will instantly forget it. And there's also, you talk about, businesses run by lists, and there's that day to day, and then especially on a larger project, you start expanding that to week, lists, or month to month, where you're zooming out, you're looking at the construction schedule. Talk to me a little about how you guys, look at that piece of when you're thinking about those lists.
Wow. There's this theory of organization that dealing with the important before it becomes urgent. And the key is understanding the difference. And if you can take the things that you have in front of you, whether they're today, this hour, or next year, and organize them in ways that important things don't become urgent, that they're dealt with well in advance, or at least a plan or a strategy for dealing with them is played out over time, then that generally keeps you out of trouble. I saw this thing where this one guy was working his career through 3 different lists. Those things that are for now, and those things are for this week, and those things that are for next year, or some spread of that timeline. And each list had its own set of things that needed to be done within that timeline. Yeah. And I think, well, some variant of that probably makes sense. I don't know what that looks like, but I find that if I write it down, if I put it in a handwritten form, my brain has a tendency to take a picture of that and remember it better than if I typed it into a screen.
That's
now,
true.
Obviously, organizing the matrix of all the things that you have to remember on paper is really tough. And the only way to do that is electronically.
Right.
But certainly the things that are immediately in front of you, paper seems to work best.
That's great. And I think there's some science behind that too, about, memory and recollection, and, writing something down, you remember it better than typing it.
Right.
So that's great. Question for both of you: how do you keep your team on track with the specific goals of that project? Right. I mean, every job's different, right? Every schedule's different, and it all changes throughout time. But you know, how do you keep your teams on track?
So one of the ways, there's several ways that we do it. We always preach that, you know, communication is king. And so one of the things that we do is we require that our management team, they on a weekly basis provide updates. And those updates are, you know, what has happened this week, what is going to happen over the next 2 weeks or so. And so that sort of shrinks it down to this level. But then we've also got like a 3-month outlook. Okay, what does the next 3 months look like, and how do I achieve the things that I'm looking to achieve? What we do, which I'm sure lots of people do, but at the beginning of a project, we set our schedule and we set a baseline, and then that baseline is marked. And then as we sort of go through the project, then we use that baseline to see, are we ahead or behind schedule? And there are certain milestones wherein we sort of reset the baseline because it gets, you know, projects drag on sometimes, right? For a variety of reasons. But when you're building a house for 2.5 years, it's hard to predict at the beginning of those 2.5 years when each phase is going to happen. But it is important to have that baseline set so you're not just out there in the ether working under no constraints whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for example, if we've got an extra complicated foundation that everyone has predicted is going to take 6 months, and you have a month of rain or something like that, and it gets behind, it's good to know that we're behind by that many days at the end of the foundation stage. But we also want to know, okay, well, how much is framing behind or ahead of schedule? So we will reset the baseline after foundation if there is a great deviation from the original estimation.
Yeah.
And I think just the constant, so, you know, I'm looking at that schedule with my project managers, and Tim is as well. And that constant awareness of what we expect the schedule to be and communicating that to the clients on a regular basis. From a schedule standpoint, that's how we deal with it.
Right.
Of course, there's also budget and quality that are other expectations as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
You know, that's the science of project management, isn't it? Exactly what he just described.
Yeah.
And the nuance is that good project managers know how to follow that science. Great project managers know how to build the house in their head and then see the obstacles and the collisions well in advance and navigate around them. Again, those are hard people to find.
Right.
And so it may not be something that people are even have an inbred skill to do. It may be something that's a learned skill over a long period of time.
Right.
And so once you have the technical skills to look at a set of plans and be able to assemble it piece by piece in your head and identify those things that are not going to work, or those things that are going to take longer, or not fit together, or collide with other phases of the work, dealing with them 2-3 months in advance keeps the project moving. And if if you can do that, generally the project will stay on schedule. And if you can't, then it's going to continually be set back by this cycle of, we've discovered something. The trade contractor on the site found it, brought it to our attention. We took it back to the team, designer, architect, engineer,
whatever.
They got to chew on it for a little while, and then it comes back to the cycle. Meanwhile, your trade contractor is kind of waiting on some kind of resolution. And so that's really hard, especially when you have very, very unique architecture that's a one-of-a-kind, never been done before, never been fitted together like this kind of thing.
Right.
I don't know of any builder, regardless of how much experience they have, that can deal with unfamiliar construction in their head very well, right? It just...
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, I think, you're talking about like being proactive versus reactive, right? I mean, trying to, you're spending so much time either in the drawings or on site, you're able to sort of predict what's next in the pipeline and what are the roadblocks versus just, oops, so we didn't see this. And now, that's a very reactive stance to things.
Yeah.
We need approval on these shop drawings tomorrow.
Yeah, we're waiting on countertops, and
Right,
now you
whatever
got to get
the-
shop drawings, and that's being reactive. So being
right.
proactive, thinking what's coming ahead weeks in advance, weeks before you're going to need it, and then trying to identify those roadblocks.
There's a national custom home builder we talked about a while ago that has a system set up so that they actually have on-staff architects within the home building team, that once they receive a full set of documents from the architect of record, then they redraw the house piece by piece and create their own internal shop drawings to discover those things well in advance. And they resubmit all their drawings back to the architect to have those discussions.
That's smart.
Here's the actual
know that.
constructible detail of what you're trying to achieve in architectural intent.
Yeah.
And that probably works, but it costs the project hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in the life of a project to have that process in place.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. I think
Something you said, Tim, about being able to build a house in your head. I think a part of that is not just recognizing, okay, what things do I have to do to put this house together, but really understand what is the critical path. And that helps you prioritize things, right? And so, we build our schedules and we put our Gantt charts together, and you can, decide what the critical path is. But it's not necessarily right? So it takes experience to do that properly. And I think then it is, as you're going through the project, understanding, okay, I've got this issue where I need to, go back to the architect or the engineer or whatever, but I understand how that fits into the critical path and whether or not I need to be stressed about it, right? Or understanding, okay, I know what my critical path is. I know I need to have these shop drawings done now in order to be able to get to where I need to be according to that critical path.
Were y'all always capable of doing that, or was that a learned skill, like being able to forecast in advance and build something in your head? Was that a natural talent, or did you learn it?
So I have like zero actual schooling. So everything, I ran my own company for 10 years, and I started off self-performing everything. And then as I grew, then I turned into just managing stuff. And the ability to build something in your head, I think I always I kind of had that.
Right, yeah.
I'm a very visual-oriented person. But the critical path and understanding sequencing and getting ahead of stuff, that was definitely a learned skill
It's just
over
experience,
time.
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Last topic. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. So you have the owner, the architect, and the contractor. Who I have an answer in my head, but I want to hear y'all's opinion on this. Who do you think is responsible ultimately for driving quality?
Yeah, I don't know if that's like a cut and dry answer.
Yeah, I know what I think I know what I would like, what I believe. I know what your listeners would like to hear.
exactly.
And I think in our world, and maybe in your world too, I mean, we hold that responsibility on our shoulders, right?
Yes.
Ultimately, we are the executor. We are the deployer of the architectural intent and the owner's client's dream. And so if we can be involved with the design and evolution of the process of creating the documents for the house,
Right.
so that we understand it from nail to screw to fastener to board and, appliances and light fixtures, everything. We know where the decisions came from, what the owner's motivations are, and what the architect is trying to achieve architecturally or aesthetically. If we get that, if we're there,
Right.
then there's not much question. And when we come to a decision, I already know they want it this way, not this way. If I had to answer that for them, I'm still going to engage them in a weekly conversation about where we've evolved to fill in the blanks that are not in the documents.
Yeah.
But I think that's the key, is we have to be responsible for creating it the way the architect designed it and the way the client envisioned it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say, just to add some layers to that, kind of first and foremost, it has to come from the client through the understanding that quality costs money.
Yeah.
And so if the client's budget isn't aligned with the client's expectations on quality, you're just not going to ever get the quality, right? So,
That's great.
and I'm not saying it has to be tons of money. It just has to fit that level of the expectation.
Yeah.
And so assuming that's there, then I agree that it falls on the builder to, whether or not you have good architectural drawings, to make sure that that house is built to whatever level of quality is the expectation.
Can I almost say something on that, if I can? Of one of the challenges that I see some today is that people are oftentimes comparing, from a client perspective, what is happening in real life with something that's digital. So, I'll have people say, hey, I want something that looks like this. And they show me a photograph on social media or something like that. And something that's often assumed is that the quality in the photograph is high, which might not necessarily be the case. I'm sure you guys have known, even work that I've done that I see photographed versus in real life, and I think, oh wow, that photograph looks different than what it looked like in real life. Some cases better.
Oh yeah.
And so when we're talking about quality too, that I think there's a challenge there of assuming everything that is seen digitally has a high level of quality, and so the assumption now is that oftentimes people come in and they don't understand the levels of quality when they're looking at something in real life.
That's very true.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I'm always remodeling my house, and so my wife and I are always looking.
Still?
Yeah,
Oh
always.
my gosh.
My wife will
Love
send me
it.
this picture, and she's like, "Oh, I really love this," and it'll be a picture of a whole kitchen or something.
Yeah.
And my first question is, "Well, what do you love about
Yeah,
it?"
what about it?
Because there's 1,000 things that are happening, and I could point out at least 10 things that are bad that I wouldn't want in my house because they're not great quality, but you don't notice that when you're looking at a pretty picture.
100%.
That's very true, that oftentimes clients who don't do this for a living, they look at things in big picture.
Yeah.
And they don't focus on details. Now,
As they should.
I'll be a little crude here and say that when clients move in and they begin to use the house, let's say they're in the restroom and they're sitting there looking at the trim in their toilet room, and it's like, God, I never noticed that before. Those joints don't quite meet up. They had never seen that before.
Good call. Yeah.
Right? So now they're beginning to micromanage the details because they're living there and they're seeing it. But when their first impression is like, oh, this is wonderful, it's great, right? So all the more reason why we have to be the arbiter of those tiny little details.
Absolutely.
Because they will eventually see them.
And
Absolutely.
that's why the room that the
it.
toilet is in should always be the best finish you could ever do. Because the client will sit on that toilet and look around at things that are going on in that room.
I always do that. That's usually where I start my punch list. Is sitting on the toilet and just looking
There
around.
is
Exactly.
What do I see?
Yeah.
Because your perspective
Toilet.
changes.
Yeah.
You know, at different levels, you see things that you don't normally see.
That's so good.
I agree with all of y'all's take on that. I sort of saw this as kind of like a triangle where the owner is sort of at the top on the top of that triangle, and they set the tone for the project, and they're ultimately the architect and then builder is really like the cutting edge, right? You're the one out there performing the work and executing everything. So, I mean, I agree with both of y'all. The builder is, I think, ultimately responsible, but that tone is set by the client. Like, what are their expectations? Because that can even change on one project. They might have an expectation in one room or one side of the house, and it might be totally different in another room.
Yeah.
I mean, we've experienced, I think we've all experienced that, where it's like, this is the master bathroom. It needs to be perfect.
Yeah.
It's like, but this is a guest bedroom or a guest bathroom. I don't really care so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's those expectations can change even on one project.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having to navigate that and then the expectation from the architect. Every project's different. Every client is different, and some architects are very involved, and some have very poor quality drawings, and you have to guess at a lot of things, and So I think ultimately that burden is on the contractor to drive quality, but tone is obviously set by the client.
Yeah.
So.
I think also too, I mean, from the client standpoint, I think they think that the builder is responsible for quality.
They should, yeah.
And it's the builder who comes back to fix anything that's substandard, right? Even if it was a poorly drawn detail by the architects, it's the builder that has to come fix it.
Right.
So ultimately, I mean, it's in our best interest to do the best quality we can.
That's why alignment is so important. And that's why the pre-construction process and our involvement in it is so important. It's because it allows the parties to discover whether or not they are aligned in their priorities, right? If we find a client who doesn't really care about quality, they just want size, volume, we're probably not aligned with them, right? If we find an architect that just wants to draw a box and really, here's a simple box that we can't really hang our hat on, it's not that interesting, we're probably not aligned with that project.
Right.
So that's important, that everybody finds a good fit, whether your client needs to find the right builder, or the architect needs to recommend the right builder, builders need to join the right team. All those things are important for the success of the project. We like to think of ourselves as setting a fairly high standard for quality, but that means, not just fit and finish, right? It means aligning ourselves with a good aesthetic, aligning ourselves with, a good site work. There's a lot to it.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, final question for you guys. I'm interested to hear about work in process. This podcast y'all do. It's fairly new, right? About a year, I think.
Yes, we just started our second season. I think we late summer last year is when we actually got started.
So. Yeah.
So the idea behind it was kind of just, this plays well off of what Tim just said, is it's a way for us at Reisinger Build to talk about what our process is at the company, whether it's pre-construction or the build or whatever, so that potential clients and architects can get to know us and our process a little better and understand before they even meet us if there is that alignment, right? Like, are these people doing the kinds of things that we would like done? And so that's sort of was the genesis behind it. And it's evolved a little. We bring guests on to talk about a variety of different things, but all from the sort of perspective of this is how we do things at Reisinger Build.
So it's really kind of a internally focused, where you're shining a light in the world of just Reisinger Build. Obviously, Reisinger is it's a very popular company. Everybody knows it from the Build Show. So this is different in the sense that it's separate from Build Show, and it's really focused on just what you guys do here in Austin.
Yeah,
I think that's great.
That's right. I think it also helps define us a little bit as the home building company versus the production company, because we do get jobs from people who are familiar with the Build Show.
Sure.
And so it's important to sort of distinguish ourselves from that, because the Build Show is nationwide, right, or worldwide,
right.
And we are just here local, and so we want to speak to. We're not looking for a giant audience, right? We're just trying to speak to people who are interested in what we do as the home building company, and to a lesser extent, but also still there, educate other builders into how we do things, and maybe it would work for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we started out just wanting everyone to understand here's a good way for builders, architects, and homeowners to assemble a team and work through the process of design and building a home for successful projects. And then we started expanding that onto, well, who is the team? Maybe we should interview or bring on some architects or engineers, right? Several different kinds of engineers. Maybe we should bring on, other design professionals, enclosure specialists maybe, and which we've done. I think we'll also expand into touching on technical aspects of building, that not just how we assemble it, but why we use increased quality products or better air sealing techniques or sophisticated air conditioning equipment or integrated home house controls and all those things that go into the science of building. Not that we're trying to be the build show, but that we're trying to demonstrate to the local collaborators, the local team members, that we understand the sophisticated systems that go into making a quality home.
Yeah, and value their work.
Yeah.
That's
And
great.
so, that's it.
No, I think when you're looking at something like this as an internal tool, like we've talked about this a lot. Often it's easy to get siloed on projects. You're within a company, you may have great relationships, good communication, but someone's working on something over here and someone else is working on something over here. And how do you distribute that information? I think y'all's tool there could really has a lot of potential for your team. So
That's a
I'm,
good point.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point. And that is something that we encourage is when I first started at the company, it was very much, well, granted, it was in the middle of COVID. So
Yeah, right. Even more so.
Yeah.
there wasn't even an office.
No
right?
one's
But-
even looking
all
at
in
each other. Right,
silos.
exactly. Yeah.
But that is so we have monthly or bi-monthly project manager meetings where we all kind of talk about our projects with each other and problem solve and have that synergy. And I do think that's really important.
Another tool.
I wish we could have
tool
more
chest.
collaboration, but it's really hard
That's hard.
because you got to be on the project site so much, isolated from the rest of the team, that it does disturb that collaboration to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, we have the same issue, same hurdles. So Tim, I actually lied. I have one more question. I'm interested to hear. So you've been with Risinger from the beginning. What did you think when he started first making videos and putting them on YouTube? What were your thoughts? We're like, oh, this crazy guy doing
Well,
videos.
I haven't
awesome.
been with
I
him
love it.
since the beginning. I've known him
that's
since the
good.
beginning of his company here, but
Okay.
didn't start working with him until 5 years later. But right at the time we got together, one of the reasons we got together is because he started with blogs, which ended up being video blogs, and then that developed into videos. And he really just has this incredible passion and talent for being in front of the camera and showing with humility those things that he's learned through making mistakes. Look what I screwed up. Look how bad this turned out, and here's what I learned from it, and here's the people that helped me solve it, and here's how you should do it in the future.
That's great.
Those kinds of things seem to be very appealing to people, so much that he's not just proactively pursued it, he's been sucked into that world.
Oh yeah.
And the nature of my presence and Daniel's presence and people like us have allowed him to fulfill that need in the industry. Now, as a volume builder, track home builder, production builder, infill builder, whether you can justify all the methodology and practices that we try to promote, that's a different conversation.
Sure.
But there is some level of improvement that we can all make in anything
Absolutely.
above code minimum, right?
Oh yeah.
And so that's the focus of sort of that drive, is to try to get the entire industry to step up and do things that will make houses last longer than the 30-year cycle that we've been used to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Build Show has been a great resource. It's a great resource for everybody. I mean, even when I first started, it was a great learning tool for me.
Yeah.
And seeing you guys even contribute to it, you always have something great to say. So I appreciate you guys coming on and talking with us. You know, just a bunch of, couple dudes in a room.
No,
You know.
Yeah.
we appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
for having
Yeah,
us.
I appreciate
It's
your
an
time.
honor.
So
Yeah.
you guys are awesome. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
bet.
absolutely.
Yeah.